It was yesterday. Not for you. Those were the words my son-in-law hissed when I asked about my own daughter's wedding. Imagine that, being told you're no longer real family. For years, I had dreamed of walking her down an aisle lined with white roses, the flowers her late father once promised would always remind us of love. Instead, I stood outside in silence, clutching a gift meant for a day I was never invited to. And in that silence, I realized they had erased me completely. My name is Helen Carter, and for the past 27 years, my entire life has been built around raising my only daughter, Emily. After my husband's passing, I gave up my teaching job, sold the small cabin we once called our escape, and poured every ounce of my being into giving Emily the best future possible. She was my anchor in the storm, the only reason I kept breathing when grief nearly drowned me. So when she met Mark Davis, I truly tried, to open my arms. He was charming, in that smooth, polished way men can be when they're hiding something sharp beneath the surface. I told myself it was just my protective instinct, that no man would ever be good enough for Emily. But then little things began to pile up. Mark would talk over me at dinners, correct my stories as if he were the one who had lived them, and roll his eyes whenever Emily glanced away. Once, when I asked about their plans for the holidays, he smirked and said, "We'll see if it's convenient." Convenient, as though family could be scheduled like a dentist appointment. I ignored the warning signs. Or maybe I didn't ignore them. I just couldn't bear to admit that my daughter might choose someone who didn't see me as family at all. Weeks turned into months, and soon Emily called with news that both thrilled and broke me. She and Mark were engaged. I pressed the phone against my chest after the call ended, whispering to her father's photograph on the mantel, "We did it, love. She's going to have the life we dreamed for her." But dreams have a cruel way of twisting into something unrecognizable. When I asked about the wedding date, eager, notebook in hand, ready to help with plans, Mark smirked, leaned back in his chair, and said words that sliced through me like ice. It was yesterday, just for real family. At first I laughed. I thought it was a bad joke. Who jokes about something like that? But Emily wouldn't meet my eyes. Her hands twisted in her lap, her engagement ring glinting under the kitchen light like a blade. "That's not funny," I whispered. Emily finally looked at me, her face pale. "Mom, we thought it would be easier this way. Small, simple, easier. As if including me would have been a burden." My world tilted. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I felt the walls closing in, the photographs of Emily's childhood, her first day of school, her graduation cap askew, mocking me from their frames. How could she erase me from the most important day of her life? But the cruelty didn't stop there. Days later, I found out the wedding had been lavish, held at the Hale estate, a grand mansion owned by Mark's wealthy godfather, Richard Hale. Guests whispered about the extravagance, crystal chandeliers, a string quartet, and a cake taller than I was. And I wasn't even sent an invitation. When I confronted Emily, she insisted it wasn't about excluding me. "It just happened quickly, Mom. Mark's family handled everything." But the truth was there, buried in Mark's smug grin every time I tried to argue. I had been erased, not just from the wedding, but from Emily's new life. Still, I clung to hope. I told myself love between mother and daughter couldn't be severed so easily. I baked Emily's favorite cinnamon rolls and left them at her door, only to find the plate returned. Untouched, I called, left messages, sent little notes. Silence echoed back, and then, just when I thought the knife couldn't cut deeper, a letter arrived in the mail, a legal envelope. Inside were documents that made my hands tremble. It wasn't just the wedding I had been excluded from. There were whispers of property transfers, inheritance disputes, and signatures I didn't recognize. Someone was trying to write me out of my own life. I folded the papers slowly, carefully, as if handling something toxic. My chest ached, but beneath the pain, a flicker of steel sparked to life. They thought I was powerless. a grieving widow too sentimental to fight back. But they had forgotten one thing. I had been fighting for Emily's future since the day she was born, and I wasn't about to stop now. Before I share how I turned their betrayal into the twist they never saw coming, don't forget to subscribe to Twist Stories and tell me in the comments, if it were you, how would you react to being erased from your own daughter's wedding? The Sunday after I learned of the wedding that wasn't mine, I drove to Emily's new home, a sleek townhouse in the upscale part of the city, paid for, I later discovered, by Richard Hale. I baked a peach cobbler, the same dessert Emily begged for every summer. My hands shook as I carried it up the front steps, the warm dish cradled like a peace offering. But when the door swung open, it wasn't Emily who stood there. It was Patricia Davis, Mark's mother. She looked me up and down with eyes sharp as glass. "Oh," she said flatly, "it's you." Her tone made it sound as if I were a solicitor, not her son's mother-in-law. "I came to see Emily," I explained, forcing my voice steady, "just for a moment." Patricia's lips curved into a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "They're busy settling in. Newlyweds, you know. It's important to give them space." "I'm her mother," I reminded her. Her smile widened. "And now she has a husband. Priorities change." Before I could reply, she plucked the cobbler from my hands and shut the door. I stood there on the stoop, staring at the wood grain, listening to the lock slide into place. That was the first cut. The second came days later, when I drove past Emily's old apartment. The flower boxes I had helped her plant last spring were gone, replaced by cold iron railings. A "for rent" sign dangled in the window. No call, no goodbye. My daughter had vanished into a new world overnight. When she finally returned one of my calls, her voice was clipped, rehearsed. "Mom, Mark thinks it's better if we establish our own space. Independence, you know. We'll visit when things calm down." Independence. The word tasted bitter. I had raised her to be strong, to make her own choices. But this wasn't independence. This was isolation, carefully constructed walls to keep me out. And Mark was the mason. One evening, while sorting through the stack of envelopes on my kitchen counter, I found another legal letter. My name was misspelled, Helen Carter, but the intent was clear. It referenced the Carter cabin, the small lakeside property my late husband and I had once dreamed of retiring to. I'd sold it years ago to fund Emily's education, or so I thought. But the document suggested otherwise. It hinted at transfers and trust revisions, names like Patricia Davis and Mark Davis appearing where they had no right to be. My head spun. Had something been filed in my name? Had Emily been convinced to sign something without understanding? I took the papers to Linda Moore, a retired paralegal and my oldest friend. She spread the pages across her kitchen table, squinting through her reading glasses. "This doesn't add up," she murmured. "These aren't finalized, but they're drafts. It looks like someone's trying to maneuver property into another name without your direct consent." "Can they do that?" My voice cracked. "Not legally," she said firmly, "but if Emily's been persuaded to sign anything as your heir, they might be laying groundwork. It's messy and dangerous." I felt the room sway. My sacrifices, all the long nights working double shifts, the years of wearing the same winter coat so Emily could have dance lessons, the cabin I let go of to keep her future secure, were being rewritten, erased, just as surely as I had been from her wedding. That weekend, I forced myself to attend a neighborhood gathering at Richard Hale's estate. He had sent out invitations, gilded and embossed, boasting of his family's newest union. My stomach turned at the phrasing, but curiosity and a desperate need to see my daughter drove me through those iron gates. The estate glittered with chandeliers and laughter. Waiters in pressed uniforms carried trays of champagne. And there, in the center of it all, stood Emily. My Emily. Except she wasn't mine anymore. She wore a designer gown, her hair swept into an elegant chignon, Patricia no doubt approved of. She looked radiant and untouchable. When she spotted me, Her smile faltered. Mark's arm tightened possessively around her waist. "Mom," she said softly, as if caught in a crime. Mark didn't bother with pleasantries. "Helen," he drawled, his voice thick with disdain. "How unexpected." Richard Hale appeared then, tall and imposing, his silver hair gleaming under the chandeliers. He extended a hand to me, but his eyes were cold. "Always nice to see Emily's extended family." Extended, as though I were some distant cousin. Patricia's voice rang out like a bell. "Darling, why don't you introduce us properly?" Emily stammered, glancing between me and the circle that had closed around her. "This is my mother." Patricia's smile tightened. "Of course. How quaint." Heat flooded my face. The whispers began immediately rippling through the crowd like poisoned wine. Where was she at the wedding? Why wasn't she included? I left before the night ended, humiliation burning through me. But beneath that humiliation, the spark of defiance grew hotter. When I returned home, I opened the drawer where I kept every document, every receipt, every scrap of proof of the life I had built with my husband. And as I spread them across the table, I whispered to his photograph once more. "They think they've erased me. They think they can take everything. But they've underestimated me. And they've underestimated you, too. Because somewhere, buried in those papers, was a truth they had all forgotten. My husband had prepared for this. He had left more than just memories behind, and I was going to find it. For nights, I barely slept. My dining table was buried under stacks of manila folders, yellowed receipts, and the heavy leather-bound ledger my husband Thomas had kept before he passed. I traced his handwriting with my fingers, the loops of his cursive both tender and sharp. He was meticulous, every expense, every tax filing noted with precision. "The world isn't kind to widows," he used to say, half a joke, half a warning. "So I'll make sure you're never left unprotected." At the time, I thought it was simply his way of easing my worry. But now, staring at documents with Patricia's name scrawled where it never should have been, I wondered if Thomas had known something all along. I called Linda Moore the next morning. She answered on the second ring, her voice brisk. "You found something, didn't you?" "Not yet," I admitted, my voice hoarse. "But there's something missing, a gap." He always filed the cabin property tax documents by hand, every year, but 1998 is gone. "Bring everything here," she instructed. "Every scrap." Her kitchen once again became a war room. Papers fanned out across the oak table, her magnifying glass balanced on the bridge of her nose. For hours, she hummed thoughtfully, the clock ticking like a metronome. Finally, she froze. "Helen." "Look." I leaned over. She tapped a stapled packet. The property deed transfer, 1999. I remembered the envelope I had found earlier labeled Property Transfer 1999. I had assumed it was meaningless, but Linda's finger landed on a line halfway down the page. Tenants by the entirety. "What does that mean?" I whispered. Her eyes gleamed. "It means Thomas didn't leave the cabin solely in your name. He made sure it was protected as a marital asset. When he passed, full ownership transferred automatically to you. No court, no probate, ironclad." I stared at her, the words tumbling through me like sunlight breaking a storm. "So, they can't touch it?" "They can't even breathe on it," Linda confirmed. "Patricia, Mark, even Emily. They can draft 1,000 phony revisions. None of it holds. The law is clear." Relief swelled in my chest, followed quickly by anger. They had tried to paint me as a bystander, a relic of Emily's old life. But here, in black and white, was proof that I still held the keys. Still, one question gnawed at me. Why target the cabin? Linda seemed to read my mind. "It's valuable land, Helen. Lakeside, rezoned for development last year. Developers would kill for it. Patricia knows that. Mark knows that. They want you out of the picture so Emily signs everything over. The room tilted again, but this time, not with despair, with clarity. I saw it all, the wedding without me, the whispered drafts, the way Patricia looked at me as though I were expendable. It wasn't about family, it was about power. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with Thomas's photograph propped against a stack of papers. "They think I'm weak," I murmured. "They think I'll step aside." But Thomas's eyes, frozen forever in that frame, reminded me of the truth. I had carried Emily through storms he never lived to see. I had kept the lights on, the food on the table, the roof over our heads. I was not weak. I called Linda again. "If this goes public, it'll destroy Emily's image. The society parties, the Davis family pride. Are you sure this is the path?" Her voice was steady. "Sometimes the only way to save someone is to let them face what they've chosen. You've protected her long enough. Now, you protect yourself." The next time I saw Emily was at a family dinner, a gathering at Richard Hale's estate. I wasn't invited, of course, but Linda insisted I go anyway. "You have the right to be there," she said. "Let them see you. Let them underestimate you one more time." The dining hall glittered with crystal. A performance of wealth. Emily sat at Mark's side, her laughter practiced, her hand resting lightly on his sleeve. Patricia presided at the opposite end like a queen, her pearls glowing against her throat. Richard toasted to new beginnings. I waited until the clinking glasses quieted, until every eye turned toward me in surprise. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, my voice calm, steady. Patricia's lips curled. "I'm afraid this is family only, Helen." My hand brushed the envelope in my purse, the deed, the clause, the truth Thomas had safeguarded for me. I smiled, though my heart pounded. "That's exactly why I'm here," I replied. The room fell silent. For the first time, I saw flickers of unease in Patricia's gaze, in Mark's tightening jaw. They thought I had come to beg, to cling. They had no idea that the balance had already shifted, because I wasn't there to plead. I was there to remind them that I still had a voice, and soon the whole room would hear it. The air in Richard Hale's dining hall was heavy with the scent of roasted lamb and the clinking of crystal glasses. Conversation buzzed like a hive of bees, but when I stood clutching my glass of water, the room stilled. Every eye turned to me. Some curious, some annoyed, some openly hostile. Patricia Davis leaned back in her chair, her pearls catching the candlelight. "Helen," she said smoothly, "perhaps you'd like to sit down before you embarrass yourself." I smiled faintly. "I'm quite comfortable standing." Emily shifted uncomfortably beside Mark, her hand trembling as she set down her fork. My daughter's face, my child, was pale. Conflicted, but silent. I drew in a breath, steadying my voice. "I raised Emily on my own after her father died. Every choice I made, every sacrifice was to secure her future. When Thomas and I owned the Carter cabin, we dreamed it would one day be our family's retreat, a place for our grandchildren to laugh, to run through the woods. That cabin was never just property. It was legacy." Mark chuckled under his breath. "Legacy? It's just a piece of land, and it's not even yours anymore." That was his mistake. I pulled an envelope from my purse and placed it on the table. The shuffle of papers was loud in the silence. Actually, it is. In fact, it always has been. My husband insured it the year before he died. Tenants by the entirety. Linda's words rang in my mind as I continued. That means, when he passed, ownership transferred fully and permanently to me. No court, no contest. Ironclad. Patricia's smile faltered. "That's absurd. We've already filed revisions." "Drafts," I interrupted, my voice sharper now. "Phony drafts. Illegal attempts to transfer property that never belonged to you. And if you push it, I'll be more than happy to bring those drafts to the district attorney. Fraud isn't something that looks good on a society matron's resume, Patricia." The room buzzed. Forks clattered against plates. I could feel the tide shifting. Richard Hale cleared his throat, his deep voice booming across the table. "Now, let's not cause a scene. Surely this can be resolved quietly." I turned to him, meeting his gaze. "Quietly? Is that how you prefer your dealings, Mr. Hale? Behind closed doors, where the voices of widows don't matter? Where mothers are erased from their daughters' lives?" His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Mark slammed his hand against the table. "You're poisoning Emily against her own husband. This is exactly why we didn't want you involved. Always meddling. Always dragging her down." I looked directly at Emily. My voice softened, though my chest ached. "Is that what you believe, sweetheart? That I dragged you down? Every late-night shift, every penny I saved, every dream I set aside, it was for you, not for me. For you." Her eyes brimmed with tears, but Mark's grip on her arm kept her silent. I straightened, letting the strength in my voice return. "You tried to erase me from the wedding, from the family, from the property Thomas and I built together, but the truth is written in black and white. You can't erase me. And you can't take what doesn't belong to you." I pulled the deed from the envelope and laid it on the table, sliding it toward Patricia. There it is. The law, the signature, the clause, ironclad. Patricia's face drained of color as her eyes scanned the document. For once, her polished poise cracked. This can't be. It is," Linda's voice rang out from the back of the room. She had insisted on coming as my witness, quietly slipping in during dinner. Now she stepped forward, holding a briefcase. "I've made copies for the county clerk, the land registrar, and the bank. Any attempt to interfere with this deed will be considered fraud. Helen owns the cabin, full stop." The room erupted in whispers, some sympathetic, some scandalized. The Davis family's perfect facade was crumbling right there, under the glittering chandeliers. Mark surged to his feet, his voice rising. "You can't do this. Emily's my wife now. What's hers is mine." "Except it isn't hers," I replied, my words sharp as a blade. "It's mine, and until the day I choose to pass it on, it will remain mine. That's what Thomas wanted. That's what the law says." I let the silence hang heavy, and then softly, deliberately, I added, "And I won't be bullied out of my own family again." Emily's sob broke the silence. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. For a moment, I almost reached for her, but I stopped. She had chosen this path. She would have to walk it herself. Patricia rose abruptly, knocking over her wine glass. "We're leaving," she snapped. She gathered her coat with trembling hands, her eyes darting away from mine. Mark muttered curses under his breath, yanking Emily to her feet. But Emily resisted, just slightly, just enough to make Mark falter. And in that tiny pause, I knew. The foundation they'd tried to build on lies and manipulation was beginning to crack. As they stormed out, Richard Hale remained seated, his expression inscrutable. He glanced at me, then at the deed still lying on the table. "You've got steel in you, Mrs. Carter," he said finally, "perhaps more than anyone gave you credit for." I held his gaze. "Perhaps you should have looked closer before underestimating me." The room applauded quietly, not loud, not raucous, but respectful. A ripple of acknowledgement that, for once, the widow had not been silenced, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight on my chest begin to lift. The next morning, sunlight poured through my kitchen window, soft and golden, illuminating the steam rising from my teacup. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt a stillness inside me. Not the heavy silence of being ignored or excluded, but the quiet peace of knowing I had stood my ground. The Davis family hadn't spoken to me since that dinner. Patricia's circle had already begun to whisper, her polished reputation now shadowed by the word fraud. Mark, furious and humiliated, had moved out of the home he shared with Emily, retreating to one of Patricia's apartments. And Emily, my daughter, had not come by. Though Linda told me she'd been seen wandering near the old Carter cabin, her eyes swollen from crying. It hurt. God, it hurt. But pain is sometimes the price of truth. I drove to the cabin that afternoon. The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I pulled into the familiar driveway. The house stood tall against the autumn sky, its wood weathered but strong, much like myself. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and memory. I ran my fingers over the banister Thomas had sanded by hand, the hearth where Emily had curled up with her books as a girl. For a moment, grief threatened to drown me. But then I remembered his handwriting in that old ledger. If anyone tries to change this, remember, survivor's clause. Thomas had believed in me. Even in death, he had left me the tools to protect myself. I lit a fire in the hearth, sat in his old armchair, and let the warmth seep into my bones. The cabin was mine, not just legally, but spiritually. It was the place where I had poured my love, my labor, my sacrifices, and now it was where I would rebuild. A week later, Emily appeared at my door. She looked fragile, her face drawn, her hands twisting nervously. "Mom," she whispered. I stepped aside. "Come in." She sat at the kitchen table, staring at her clasped hands. "I don't know how it got this far. Mark kept saying you were difficult, controlling. He said if we wanted to move forward, we had to cut ties. I thought—" Her voice cracked. "I thought I was choosing love, but all I did was hurt you." Tears pricked my eyes, but I held them back. "Emily, I never wanted to control you. I wanted to protect you, but you're an adult now. You have to decide what kind of woman you want to be. Just know this. Love without respect is not love. It's manipulation." She nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I see that now." "I'm so sorry." I reached across the table and took her hands. "I forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means I choose not to carry hate in my heart. Still, Emily, there will be boundaries. I won't let anyone, not even you, try to erase me again." She swallowed hard, nodding. "I understand." For the first time in a long while, I saw the little girl in her, the child who used to run into my arms after school, who trusted me with her whole heart. Perhaps we could find our way back, perhaps not, but the choice was now hers. Life settled into a new rhythm. Linda encouraged me to channel my strength into something greater than my own survival. "You've always been a teacher, Helen," she said. "Why not be one again?" So I did. I opened the doors of the Carter cabin every Saturday morning to the children of the neighborhood. Some came from families too busy to notice them, others from homes fractured like mine. I taught them to read, to bake, to tend a garden, to believe in themselves. Their laughter filled the halls, echoing through rooms once heavy with loss. Each week more children came, and with them more light returned to my life. On a crisp winter morning, as I hung a quilt over the living room wall, I paused. It was the wedding quilt I had stitched decades ago, every square a piece of my story. The first house, Emily's baby blanket, Thomas's work shirt. It had nearly been discarded, forgotten, erased. Now it hung proudly in my cabin, a reminder that nothing, not manipulation, not betrayal, not even time, could strip away the truth of who I was. This was my legacy, not just the cabin or the deed, but the love I had poured into every thread, every sacrifice, every lesson. A legacy of resilience, of dignity, of refusing to vanish quietly. Sometimes at night, I still heard Mark's mocking words echo in my mind. It was yesterday, just for real family. But I no longer flinched, because I knew the truth. Family isn't defined by who tries to erase you. It's defined by who remembers, who respects, who loves without condition. I had been tested, I had been wounded, but I had also risen. And to every woman listening now, every woman who has been silenced, dismissed, or betrayed, I say this: your story does not end in erasure. It begins where you reclaim your voice. Respect isn't given by blood. It's earned through love and kindness. If you've ever been made to feel invisible in your own family, remember, you are not alone, and you are not powerless. If you were in my shoes, standing at that dinner table with the deed in your hand, what would you have said? Would you have stayed silent, or would you have spoken your truth? Share your story in the comments. Let others here know they're not alone. Because in this community, every voice matters. And before you go, don't forget, subscribe to Twist Stories and ring the bell. Here, we honor every tale of sacrifice, betrayal, and the sweet justice of a twist no one saw coming.